Hi there, I'm Syd Jones. We're going to talk a little bit about the Margarita today because this is the 40th anniversary of the finding of the main pile. How about that? And we're going to talk about the specific day that we found the main pile. So let me set the stage a little bit. We had 3 boats at the time out on the site. There was the Budde-Jones, captained by Mel Fisher, the Swordfish, captained by Ted Miguel, where I was, as well as the Arbutus, which was a large retired Coast Guard buoy tender that we used to just maintain a presence on the site. But it also had a compressor on it for filling tanks. Now, we had been finding bits and pieces on the sea floor during our initial survey that indicated that we may have found one of the 1622 fleet ships. It could be the Margarita, it could be the Atocha. We didn't know well enough at that time. And that day, the Swordfish was involved with surveying in the area, simply because we'd run completely out of air from the previous few days of diving. The Budde-Jones was also just about out of air for their tanks, but they were digging a little bit to the west of where we were surveying, and they were kind of short-handed. They called us on the radio and said, "Hey, can you spare a diver?" And we said, "Sure, we'll give you Don. Don, why don't you go over to the Budde-Jones?" And as we transferred Don, we also got all their empty air tanks, and we were going to make a run on the Swordfish over to the Arbutus so we could fill all of the tanks. So while the Budde-Jones kept digging, we headed over to the Arbutus, started filling the tanks, but we found that there was a problem with the compressor, so we were trying to repair that. Now, I will say at this point that the Budde-Jones was having a hard time digging. The currents in this new area that we were working are very, very strong. They just didn't have the power to be able to force their propeller wash down through the mailboxes down to the sea floor effectively. And as the tide started to really run, they weren't able to really dig at all. And that was a problem that they were having. As we found on the Swordfish that there were no more tanks going to be filled that day due to the damage on the compressor and the Arbutus, we decided it was time for us to head home and get our tanks filled at a dive shop and get parts for the compressor on the Arbutus. Well, as we were leaving the Arbutus, getting ready to head back to Key West, we got a strange call from the Budde-Jones. We could hear a lot of laughing in the background, and they said, "Swordfish, come over and help us with our whaler." It was an unusual call. So we headed towards the Budde-Jones, and as we approached, we could see Kevin Farr holding something in his hand far above his head, and it turned out to be a big gold bar. We were amazed. And eventually we found out that Don, remember the person that we had transferred over to the Budde-Jones, he had gotten bored trying to work underneath the ineffective blowers on the Budde-Jones on the seafloor, and he had swum away from the boat, just kind of wildcatting on his own, I guess. And he swam about 150 feet away from where the Budde-Jones was, and lo and behold, he found a huge piece of galleon structure, mounds of ballast, silver bars, coin chests, all sorts of stuff laying exposed on the seafloor. He had swum back to the Budde-Jones. They had moved their boat over on top of this feature, but they couldn't do anything because the current was running so hard. So Ted immediately, being the operations manager, stopped all recovery efforts on the Budde-Jones, and he said, "I don't want to do any more recovery until this site is thoroughly mapped and photographed." So he maneuvered the Swordfish, and we ended up anchoring stern to stern with the Budde-Jones, and with our sterns about 20 feet apart. And we had a little powwow between the back decks, and it was decided that we would dust with the Swordfish's blowers a little area just to the south of where the wood feature was. There was a solution hole there that had some loose coins in it, and Ted agreed to allow the divers to pick up a few coins out of that before all of our air went away. Because remember, we had almost no air in our tanks. There was like 200 pounds or 300 pounds per tank in tanks that normally carried 3,000 pounds. The Budde-Jones was kind of in the same boat. They were out of air too. So what few tanks we could scrounge up, everybody got in the water, and we formed a big circle around this solution hole while Swordfish's blowers started dusting away the sand out of this big solution hole. The solution hole was maybe about 8 feet across, 4 feet wide. We had no idea how deep it was. It's kind of like a big pothole in the seafloor. So we're all down there on the bottom, and coins are being exposed as if a giant hand is fanning the sand away, and we're picking up the coins as they're exposed. The fellow right next to me immediately saw a gold ring with an emerald in it. Pretty neat. The guy on the other side of me also found a clump of coins together, and I found a little gold link out of a gold money chain, the first gold I had ever found. So we're all real happy, everything's going great. Our big problem is we were running out of air, and the entire operation had to come to a stop. Now imagine being out there over this big pile of material. Who knows what was there? We had the wood area, the silver, exposed silver bars, copper ingots, chunks of coins, all sorts of stuff, and none of us could dive. So the decision was made for the swordfish to gather up all of the air bottles, go into Key West, come back out the following day. Because the water was so shallow, only 18 feet deep there, the Virgin Lona was going to stay on the site to protect it while we were gone. So swordfish steamed into Key West that night. We filled up the air bottles and refueled early the next morning, and then came back out, and we worked the rest of that solution hole for the entire next day before returning back to Key West that night. We'd run all of our air out again and had no way of replenishing the air. So a pretty amazing story that the finding of the main pile, a significant treasure find, and we didn't have enough air to really do it. So if you want to read more about that story, I wrote a book about it, Atocha Treasure Adventures, Sweat of the Sun, Tears of the Moon. It's available in the Mel Fisher Treasures gift shop. Until next time, find your treasure.